Welcome to the Daily Globe. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. A rare silence has settled over Gaza after years of relentless conflict. The world is watching closely as a US-brokered ceasefire, led by President Donald Trump, takes effect. This is the first major diplomatic breakthrough after years of failed negotiations and escalating violence. For millions affected, this pause offers hope. A chance to reunite with family, receive aid, and live without constant fear. Trump's high-stakes diplomacy, leveraging relationships with Netanyahu and Arab leaders, has forced a situation many thought impossible. The world now waits to see if this bold move is a genuine step toward peace, or just a temporary reprieve. The next few days will be critical, not just for Gaza and Israel, but for a world desperate for good news. To truly grasp the significance of today's events, we must look back at the chain of moments that have shaped the present. The story begins with a single day that changed the course of history for millions. On October 7, 2023, the world watched in shock as a sudden and devastating attack unfolded in Israel. The date is now etched into collective memory, marking the start of a crisis that would ripple far beyond the region. That morning, Hamas militants crossed into southern Israel, launching a brutal assault that left over 200 people dead and more than 240 taken hostage. The violence shattered families and communities, and the images of grief and fear quickly spread across the globe. Israel's response was swift and overwhelming. The government declared a state of war, mobilizing tens of thousands of troops and launching a massive military campaign into Gaza. The stated goals were clear: to destroy Hamas's military capabilities and to bring the hostages home. But the consequences were catastrophic. Gaza, already struggling under years of blockade, was plunged into a humanitarian disaster. Airstrikes and ground operations devastated entire neighborhoods, leaving tens of thousands dead and many more injured or displaced. The world watched as the scale of destruction grew, and the suffering of civilians became impossible to ignore. Over the next 2 years, the conflict only deepened. What began as a local tragedy quickly escalated into a regional crisis. Neighboring countries were drawn in, and the violence spilled across borders. Diplomatic efforts faltered, and global alliances began to fracture under the strain of competing interests and mounting casualties. In a historic move, several European nations recognized Palestinian statehood, breaking with decades of US policy and sending shockwaves through international diplomacy. Meanwhile, attempts at ceasefires repeatedly failed, with each truce collapsing under renewed violence and mistrust. The war's reach extended even further. Clashes erupted along the Lebanon-Israel border, and missile attacks became a grim routine. The United States, seeking to contain the conflict, launched strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, raising fears of a wider war and further destabilizing an already volatile region. Gaza, once a small strip of land on the Mediterranean, became the epicenter of a much larger power struggle. The world's attention was fixed on the enclave, as leaders debated, protesters marched, and the humanitarian crisis deepened. Amidst this backdrop of immense suffering, political deadlock, and shattered lives, a new ceasefire has emerged. It is fragile, born out of exhaustion and necessity, but it offers a glimmer of hope, a chance, however slim, for a different future. Now, the world is watching with bated breath. Can this moment finally break the relentless cycle of violence, or will history repeat itself once more? The answer remains uncertain, but for now, hope endures. Trump's return to the White House in 2025 marked a dramatic shift in U.S. Middle East policy. He bypassed traditional diplomacy, relying on personal relationships with Netanyahu and Gulf leaders. Trump's strategy: leverage economic and security interests to pressure Arab states while maintaining strong public support for Israel. Critics doubted his transactional style, but his willingness to pressure both sides produced results. The administration's 20-point plan, inspired by a French-Saudi proposal, offered conditional Palestinian statehood and an Arab-led stabilization force. Trump's approach, mixing force and persuasion, forced a moment of reckoning that traditional diplomacy had failed to achieve. Everything changed on September 9, 2025, when an Israeli airstrike in Doha killed senior Hamas negotiators and a Qatari citizen. The incident outraged Qatar, threatening the US-led Arab coalition and putting Trump's strategy at risk. Trump responded with a direct ultimatum to Netanyahu. Continued US support now depended on a change of course. Under intense pressure, Netanyahu apologized to Qatar and agreed to Trump's peace plan. The Doha incident, born of miscalculation, became the catalyst for a ceasefire. Both sides realized the military path was a dead end. Netanyahu's reversal set the stage for the current agreement. Sometimes, peace emerges from the brink of disaster. The ceasefire, launched on October 10, 2025, marks a pivotal moment in the ongoing conflict. This multi-phase deal is built around a high-stakes hostages for prisoners exchange, a process that has been the subject of intense negotiations and international scrutiny. And the agreement is not just a pause in fighting. It's a carefully crafted attempt to address some of the most urgent humanitarian and political demands from both sides. Under the terms, Hamas has 72 hours to release the remaining Israeli hostages, many of whom have been held for months in uncertain conditions. In exchange, Israel has agreed to free over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners, a move that has sparked both hope and controversy across the region. Tensions remain high over the final list of prisoners to be released. Hamas is pushing for the inclusion of high-profile detainees, some of whom are considered political symbols or have been imprisoned for decades. Israeli families, meanwhile, anxiously await news, holding on to hope and photographs of their loved ones. As part of the deal, the Israeli military has begun a partial withdrawal to the so-called Yellow Line, a significant concession after years of military presence and occupation in the area. This move is seen as a gesture of goodwill, but also a test of trust between the two sides. The agreement also opens the door for desperately needed humanitarian aid. Up to 600 aid trucks are now permitted to enter Gaza each day, carrying food, medical supplies, and other essentials to a population that has endured months of shortages and hardship. Yet, despite these promises, aid agencies on the ground report widespread confusion and a lack of coordination. The sheer scale of need, combined with logistical challenges and damaged infrastructure, makes effective distribution a daunting task. For ordinary civilians, the true measure of the agreement's success will be whether these political promises translate into real, tangible relief, food on the table, clean water, and a sense of safety for their families. Every hour that the ceasefire holds is a small but meaningful victory, offering a brief respite from violence and a glimmer of hope for a more stable future. But beneath the surface, the deeper issues that fuel this conflict remain unresolved, leaving the path forward uncertain and fragile. As the ceasefire took hold, an uneasy calm settled over Gaza for the first time in 2 years. The city, once filled with the constant sounds of conflict, now echoed with a haunting silence. For many, the quiet was unfamiliar, almost unsettling. After months of relentless bombardment and fear, the streets, usually bustling with life, were nearly deserted, as if the city itself was holding its breath, unsure of what would come next. Displaced Palestinians began returning north, only to find their homes reduced to rubble. Families who had fled violence and destruction now faced the heartbreaking reality of shattered neighborhoods. Children clung to parents as they navigated streets lined with debris, searching for any sign of what once was home. The sense of loss was overwhelming, yet there was also a quiet determination to reclaim what little remained. Satellite imagery shows nearly 200,000 buildings damaged or destroyed, 74% of Gaza City alone. The scale of destruction is almost unimaginable, with entire blocks flattened and landmarks erased. From above, the city appears as a patchwork of ruins, a stark reminder of the intensity and reach of the conflict. Amid the ruins, Hamas security forces quickly reappeared, asserting control and challenging Israel's war aims. Their presence was both a signal of resilience and a reminder that the underlying tensions remain unresolved. Patrols moved through the devastated streets, re-establishing checkpoints and making their presence known to returning residents. Rescue crews, finally able to access former front lines, uncovered hundreds of bodies beneath collapsed buildings. For days, these areas had been inaccessible, and now, the true human cost of the conflict was coming to light. The work was grim and exhausting, but vital for families desperate for closure. The scale of loss is staggering and the task of recovery daunting. Aid workers and residents alike are overwhelmed by the enormity of the destruction. Every corner of Gaza bears scars. Homes, schools, hospitals, and markets all lie in ruins. The road to rebuilding will be long and uncertain. The ceasefire has created a security vacuum, quickly filled by familiar actors. As international attention shifts, local power dynamics are already shifting. Armed groups and security forces move to assert control, shaping the fragile peace that now hangs in the balance. For many, the return home is bittersweet, relief mixed with grief and uncertainty. There are tears of joy for those reunited, but also tears for what has been lost. The future is uncertain, and the wounds of war, both physical and emotional, will take time to heal. The first hours of calm reveal both the devastation of war and the fragility of peace. In the soft morning light, Gaza stands at a crossroads, caught between the hope of rebuilding and the shadow of what has been endured. The world watches, as the people of Gaza begin the long journey toward recovery, uncertain but determined to find a way forward. The war's true cost is measured in shattered lives, not just statistics. Over 67,000 Palestinians killed. Nearly every family in Gaza is grieving. 2 years of war have left 600,000 children out of school and Gaza's economy in ruins. The ceasefire's aid is a lifeline, but real recovery requires open borders, investment, and freedom to rebuild. Israelis too bear deep scars: trauma from the October 7th attack, economic strain, and political division. Rebuilding nearly 200,000 damaged buildings will take years and billions in aid. Recovery is about more than infrastructure. It's about restoring hope and creating a path to lasting peace. The international community must ensure reconstruction is part of a sustainable, long-term solution. The ceasefire has sparked both hope and skepticism among experts and locals alike. Some credit Trump's unorthodox diplomacy for breaking the deadlock, while others warn that the deal forces painful compromises. The reappearance of Hamas security forces in Gaza is a visible sign of unfinished business. Palestinian analysts warn that without addressing root causes, occupation and lack of statehood, any calm will be temporary. Regional tensions remain high, with violence flaring in Lebanon and the West Bank, even as Gaza quiets. For peace to last, a broader diplomatic effort is needed across the Middle East. As the ceasefire's first days unfold, the world asks, what comes next? The release of hostages and the flow of aid will test the agreement's strength. Trump's visit and the formal signing ceremony aim to lock in commitments, but the real challenge is turning broad plans into reality. The hope is for a true turning point, a break from endless cycles of violence. Lasting peace requires international investment, support for moderate voices, and a credible path to a two-state solution. The future will be decided not in capitals, but by the people living with the consequences of war. For the first time in years, a path forward exists, uncertain, but real.